All right, we are going to do a few summing up questions. First of all, now that you are the entrepreneur that you are, what is symbolic action?
Symbolic action was the name I gave to my company when I left UPN. I decided that I might do lots of different things, and I needed to have some sort of just company that wouldn't make me personally liable for everything. And so I just looked for a name, and I called it Symbolic Action. And the name came from a number of sources, but the main one that it came from was from Kenneth Burke. Kenneth Burke was a great critic and theorist. Wrote a book called Language as Symbolic Action, and which was a very influential book in my early thinking about stuff. And so that's where the phrase came from. But it was also symbolic action, and ironically, in the sense that I was doing nothing, and it was symbolic action in the sense that I was interested in various levels of virtual reality and digital reality, and so which are symbolic actions. So,
but you felt that the actual creation of the company was in and of itself a symbolic action.
It was a symbolic action, exactly.
All right.
So,
all right, very good.
that's where it came from. But yeah.
Talk about your involvement with establishing the first directors training program for the Directors Guild in 1995.
Yeah, it was really Disney that I think the company itself that bears more credit than me individually. I mean, the company had always been really, really, both Jeffrey, Michael, and the culture had always been very committed to younger talent, to reaching out to talent, to reaching to diversity, to all those aspects. And so we increasingly started looking at creating programs to accomplish that. And we created a young writers program and directors program. And I took it pretty seriously because we were always looking for, particularly in the TV business, you're always looking for staff talent, for writers, for directors who are out of the norm. So we put a couple of people on it. We spent a lot of time at it. We had a fair amount of success at both. And the company was pretty committed to supporting them, which was the good part. It wasn't just an empty verbal gesture. Jeffrey took it, Katzenberg took it very, very seriously and encouraged us to do the same, and we did.
And do you still see a need for it today?
There's always a need to train people to how to be good at these jobs. There's no apprenticeship program. There's not that much production anymore in the way that there used to be. So it's harder to learn on the job, and it hasn't gotten any easier for Black filmmakers or Latino filmmakers. They still face a lot of the same hurdles in their earlier years when somebody might have access to film equipment in their high school in Chillicothe, Ohio. A kid who grows up in Southeast LA might not have the same tools. So it's really important to try to reach out and do that. So yeah, the answer is yes. And it's still a largely white middle class industry that's been created, and hopefully that'll keep changing. It's better now than it used to be, but it's not great.
Well, this will be an important one. Talk about your involvement in establishing the Archive of American Television.
Well, I'd always been interested in history, and because I'm so conscious, I come from my own background is so wrapped up in history and in European history, and I've always I read history. I'm very interested in it. And the past itself has always been interesting to me. I love the past of television, and there are a number of threads that went into it. One of them was my dear friend Danny Arnold, who was the guy who created Barney Miller, who, when I met him, we made a deal with him. Michael Eisner had a relationship with him from his ABC days, from the 70s when Barney Miller was on, and Michael made some sort of deal with him, and Danny was very wealthy. He made an incredible amount of money when Barney Miller went into syndication. He didn't really need to work, but he would race horses, and occasionally he liked to pay for his betting and for his horse racing, and so he decided he'd go back and try to do a couple of things. And Michael made a deal with him, wanted us to make a deal with him, and sort of okay by me. And I met Danny, and I really loved the guy. And I loved all those old stories about working for Martin and Lewis on the Colgate Comedy Hour, which is where he was a writer. I liked the stories about growing up basically as a street urchin in Boston, which is what he did in the 20s and 30s. He was a Depression era kid, really came from poor Jewish working class, had no money. Taught himself, went in the army, taught himself to write. He never really went to college, and had enormous respect for him. And he was an amazing. And he worked on a lot of shows that I loved when I was growing up, like Bewitched and stuff like that. So, and I'd always liked that era of television because it was the era I grew up watching. So I felt like in some ways I was closing a circle. And so Danny Arnold and Leonard Stern, who was who wrote for the Honeymooners and was involved in the creation of Get Smart. A lot of these people they were making the shows that I was watching in my living room with my parents, so I always really was interested in it. And I became friends with Danny, and we used to go to Chasen's together, and he would regale me with many stories about those days, and most of which are not sadly repeatable. But he had a pretty raw sense of humor. But he was a brilliant guy, and he was a great guy, and he was very sick. He had heart issues. And one day he, as was completely predictable, because he was also a very volatile guy who liked to get up and scream at the top of his lungs and point a cigar, and went out he could scream for hours. Parenthetically, he made a couple of really great shows for me at Disney that never got the network support that they should have. One of which is called SWAT, which is about an emergency room, group of physicians in an emergency room, and very urban. Danny's whole experience was very urban, that Barney Miller, squalid urban thing, which, again, the networks weren't interested in that experience. They were interested in, upscale doctors. But Barney's show was terrific. It just never got Danny's show was terrific. It just never got the support it needed to get. But anyway, one day Danny, his heart just popped, and he was done. He was gone. And, we buried him at Forest Lawn. And, and I kept thinking when we were there, and I was standing next to Red Buttons and Monty Hall as they were sort of bringing the casket up to that mausoleum and sort of lifting carrying it up to the second floor. There's a courtyard there with, a fountain and a bronze statue, and, we're all, the Danny's coffin is going up, and, I remember Monty Hall said, yeah, why would a guy want to be buried up on a second floor of anything? It's like, Jesus. I mean, it's just like ridiculous. Look at that. I have to carry that thing all the way up there. And Red Button said, yeah, Jews always like a good view of the pool, And, and I remember thinking about these guys and thinking, they're all, someday they'll all be gone. And it kind of saddened me, and I kept thinking about that. And at the same time, somewhere around that time, Steven Spielberg invited me to see the project he was doing on the Holocaust, which is a show project, which was recording, trying to get trying to make a recording of every single survivor of the Holocaust so that their memory is not lost forever. And I went to University of the Lot to see the project, and there was all these Silicon Graphics computers that they had, and it was clear that it wasn't just that they were putting these people on tape, which was a valuable and critical historical record, but that they could correlate that by digitizing these things, they could correlate information, and so that if somebody mentioned a certain town in Poland that they grew up in, a lot of these towns were completely obliterated. There were no survivors at all. If somebody mentioned that town and somebody else mentioned it, now you had two memories of the same place, and now you could start recreating a world and experiences just based on shared memories of people who had no current relationship with each other. And so the power of the technology was to create new links and new relationships and restore things that had been lost. And that really, I found that sort of fascinating as I thought about that. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting to get that done for the television industry? That the guys like Danny and Sheldon Leonard and the generation that really created television and that was coming of age at just the time that television was born in the 40s and 50s, and when the height of their productive lives, they're all dying, and they're hitting the mortality spike. And nobody will know anything about them or about these experiences. Even if they wrote a book or if they didn't write a book. But a lot of people weren't even writers, or there were people in front of the camera, or they were makeup artists, or they were boom guys, or they were costume guys, or whatever they were, agents, and who's recording those experiences? And the answer was, of course, nobody. And I thought, well, here's this unique. We don't know anything. We know so little about the birth of the movie business because there were so little recordings of what was happening in those days. Even the great period of the movie business, the 30s and the 40s, we know so little about. All those people have died and gone away, and if they didn't write memoirs or books, it's all gone. So very little of it really survives from a historical standpoint. I thought, well, it'd be great to do that to not let that happen for the TV business. That we're uniquely positioned, that the generation that created it is still, large parts of it are still right here, and they're geographically here, and they're still with us. And so I came up with this idea of doing the archive, and I approached Rich Frank, who was at the Academy, who was my boss at the time, but also was working at the Academy, and I guess he spoke to Sarnoff and to some of the other guys, and they invited me to come make a presentation. And I had Janet Blake, who was working with me at Disney at the time, and I don't remember who else, helped me put a presentation together. And we put the presentation together. We went and said, we'd like to do this with the Academy. It's not you guys are in a position to do it, and to finance the first few. And that was it. And they were enthusiastic. They came back and said, it's a really good idea. We'd love to do that. And I went to Bob, to Iger, and they were kind enough to put in some money, $1 million for the first, to really kind of, because we wanted to get Leonard Goldenson, and he was always on top of my, we made the list of like the first few guys that we really wanted to get, and it was always Sheldon Leonard, Milton Berle, Leonard Goldenson, a few others, and because it was Leonard, we thought it was a good opportunity to hit ABC up for money, and Bob was nice enough to cough up some dollars, and that grant is really what started what made it possible to have enough security to really start doing it, and and that was it. I left Disney, and it was very hard for me to stay involved with it when I got to UPN, just because there were so many other things pressing on my time, and this was done as I may have mentioned, I really sort of came up with this idea at the time when I was at Disney, where I was no longer interested in network television. I sort of abandoned my post, so I had a lot more time to do other things that interested me, and this was one of them. And by the time I got to UPN, I couldn't really contribute. But that's really what started. It was a combination of Danny Arnold and the Holocaust, and that's really what it was. And the Academy was nice enough to go along, and I'm very pleased to, these many years later, to see that. But the idea was that somebody that if Sheldon Leonard was at the 1939 World's Fair and Leonard Goldenson was in the 39 World's Fair, that they were there right together watching the same thing. It's sort of to be able to for somebody to type in 1939 World's Fair and see all these people totally there talking about it and the impact it had on them of seeing television for the first time, because that's where television was demonstrated, at least for the first time, at least publicly in a commercial way. That was that'd be an impactful thing, and lo and behold, it just turned out to be so.
All right, so you say that most of your Danny Arnold stories are not repeatable. Can you share a favorite that is repeatable? Maybe a Martin and Lewis story? Anything that sticks out in your mind is?
No, the best ones really aren't repeatable. But I will tell you that I have a memory of Danny telling me that when they first started, of Martin, of Jerry, actually, just when they started making money, that Jerry would put tens of thousands of dollars on the bed in a hotel room and just jump up and down in it, like in the sea, and just wash himself with money. So for some reason that memory always stuck with me, but the other ones are a little bit more, probably not stuff that is for me to put into the archive.
How do you feel now? We're talking about, this is some almost 13 years later and 600 plus interviews. How do you feel now that your own story is being included as part of this archive?
I feel old. But I'm also incredibly pleased. And I'm pleased that first of all it's still around, and that it's had the impact that it has. That it's been digitized, that it's available on Google and every other place, and that it's available. It's going to be available to kids and libraries who are studying television, and that's really why it was meant. It was meant to be an educational tool, and for people to be able to access these memories in this moment, who we're going through the future, and this moment is clearly becoming a definable moment in some level as we shift into a new one that's more digital and a different form of entertainment, where narrative will exist in different ways than it has currently. So it's really, really satisfying and it feels like it's sort of rounding out a moment in my own life and and a moment in the life of the industry. So that feels great, it's appropriate for me as well, because I feel that I'm no longer really part of that industry. Emotionally, I no longer have any interest in network television or being part of it or making television shows. I've moved on to something else, so it feels appropriate from that standpoint as well. So at every level, it feels good, except the aging thing.
All right, a few summing up questions. You talk about you've moved on to something else. Talk about your current interests, your current projects, the things that have captured your enthusiasm at this moment in your life.
Well, I spend a large part of my my life now is really with my family. I have little children that were born just around the time that UPN was in the late phases of that. My daughter's 9 years old now. My son Benjamin's 7. And it's really been great spending time with them. And I kind of wish that they had been born at a time where I could get them into Disneyland backstage for free, and I wouldn't have to call anybody at Disney for a favor, which I can't bring myself to do, but because they love going to Disneyland. So I spend a lot of time with them. Obviously, I'm very committed to trying to make comedy.com work, just to be part of the new sort of where the business is moving, and to be part of that and to try to be ahead of that curve is an intellectual and managerial and emotional challenge. So it excites me. I feel like I'm back to something pretty much what got me interested in being part of the entertainment business in the first place, which is being involved with young writers, young producers, young comedians. There's kind of vitality here and a belief in the future that if you spend any time in the network television business now, no longer exists there.
How hands-on do you get with the content creators? Is this sort of like in that magic period at Disney with the animators? Do you really get in there and get your hands dirty with them?
No, we don't really pay enough to really torture them. So I just figure if you're paying people that little, the least you could do is just leave them alone. So for the most part, we do. But it is exciting. I do hang out with them, and I do like them, and it's fun watching it happen. And that's really been a big part of what I'm interested in. And finally, I've continued to be involved in the art world. I collect art, and I've been board member of various institutions for a long period of time, and that's something that I continue to care about and spend a significant part of every day being involved with. So those are my main passions of the moment.
What do you think in your career so far has been your proudest achievement?
I'd have to say that I think what I most really have come to value personally over time is the creation of the archive, because I think it'll extend. I think it'll extend forward in time, and as I said, for a lot of reasons, I'm interested in the past and in honoring the past, and I think that this is a very pure thing that was untouched by other considerations, and it's worked really, really well. And I like that. I like the fact that it's going to be accessible to tens of thousands of people for some version of eternity. So I'm really pleased that something that just began as a notion has taken on a lot of reality that'll impact a lot of people's lives. The other stuff was just part of the gig, and it was great. It had its good moments and its bad moments, but it's not anything I ever think about or think about that I'm proud of or ashamed of. It was great to have been part of it, and I'm very lucky. My dad was a cab driver, so I've had a very fortunate life, but it's not something I'm not addicted to it. I don't. My psyche is not involved in yelling at people or in having people salute me when I come into a room. I could never take all that whole stuff really seriously. It always made me want to laugh when I saw Barry Diller in action. I just thought it was some form of comedy, and I'm sure, and I could never take myself that seriously. So or television that seriously. But the archive is a great thing, and I'm really pleased to have been part of it because it honors actual relationships that I had with people that I really cared about.
So then, perhaps in the context of that last statement, you may not have anything all that grandiose for this, but biggest regret?
My biggest regret. I don't really have. I have to say, I don't really have any. I don't have any regrets about my time in television. I don't think I tried really hard not to create reasons for regret. There were lots of frustrations, and there were things that really annoyed me or enraged me or some version of it over time. But I have no reason I can't think of any reason that I have to regret anything or be ashamed of anything. Like I said, I was very lucky to accomplish and to do what I did to begin with. Not a lot of people get to do that and to have that particular trajectory in life. I did, and it was fantastic. And it's a lot better than sitting at Time Inc. right now. We're wondering about whether I can put the book to bed at 3:00 in the morning. So it's been I've been very, very happy.
What advice would you give to an aspiring executive looking to get into media, and in the context of this archive being TV, the television business or whatever that evolves into?
I don't think, don't would be my advice. I don't, the last thing the world needs is more television executives. One is one too many, from my point of view. And I can't think of, and particularly in this environment, it's really not necessary. What the world never has enough of is, people who are passionate about ideas and passionate about supporting people with ideas. And that's really what I think you ought to do. And if you do that, and if you stay on that part of it, because people who are interested in media are probably in it because of that, because they're interested in creative things and being involved with creative people, and that if it's that, then I think it'll all work out okay. Wanting to be an executive is I don't even know what that means anymore. Nobody knows what an executive does anymore. And certainly these companies, nobody knows what they are, and whoever does understand it doesn't like it. So I don't think it's I would say don't bother, think of something really productive and engaging to do with your life, and there's a lot of need for great narrative. There's never enough good stories in the world. There's never enough people to support and finance people who want to tell good stories and to fight the fights for them. And I think those things are worth doing.
Okay, so given that statement, what advice would you give to a creator of programming or content, again, in whatever form that takes?
To make stuff. I think we're in a unique moment where you can make things for very little money. Maybe you can't make the things exactly the way what you'd want to make. If you want to make Spider-Man, obviously that's going to require a huge budget, but the cost of production, the decreasing cost of production, the decreasing cost of digital media, the decreasing cost of distribution, All those things allow somebody to just do stuff. And I'm a firm believer that if you just keep making stuff and not worry about the rest takes care of itself. Precisely because in the supply and demand equation of talent, there's never enough talent, and there's always a need for more. And this idea that talented people live in grottos unrecognized or in an attic unrecognized, I don't really believe that. I think it's the demand is so great and the need is so great, and there's so many institution entities that are looking for talented people all the time, and that what you need to do is to prove to somebody that you're talented. And the only way to do that is not to talk about it, not to make pitches, not to do all that crap that people are taught to do, not to spend time with agents, which is a really an enormous waste of time, but to make things, put it up on the internet, put it up on wherever you want to put it up, write a book, whatever it is, but make stuff. And that's the ultimate resume. And
any advice into any advice to those people how to get their work seen once they've made it?
Just keep putting it up. It gets. I know it's shocking, but the truth is it gets seen over time. You just have to keep doing it. And obviously it helps to be out here because it helps to be part of a community. Because I think it's very hard to be a creative person just operating on your own out somewhere in Nebraska. It's a very tough way to live, and creative people tend to work better when there's other people supporting them emotionally and every other way. So I think if you're going to be in a business, you should be at a place where there's other people like you who are undergoing the things you're undergoing and committed to the same things. But given that those two things are there, I think that's really, I know it sounds sort of like magical thinking, but it's not. It's not. Everything else is what's magical thinking. People sort of believing that it's all about, all this other crap, and it's just not. It never has been, and it never will be. John Ford was a great director. It's not who he knew, and people who succeed, there's always people without talent who succeed, but generally anybody with talent also succeeds. And, and you just have to kind of keep at it. But above all, it's to make things, because so many people get lost in the process of the making and the pitching and the financing, and that they never get out from the undergrowth. And I think it's to see with clarity that your goal is to reach another human being with a story. And nothing should stand in the way of that. And if it does, then you're probably not going to get there. And the guys who, everything else tends to rise to the top. That's my experience.
Okay, some last quick questions. Where do you see your career trajectory taking you from this point forward?
I have no idea. I never thought about that. I'm kind of hoping not to have a career, just to have a series of succeeding interests, and wherever those go, there's where they go. It could be in art, it could be in collecting, it could be in philanthropic stuff, it could be in launching other websites. I know that it won't be in going back to television as the world of cable or network TV. But in anything else, I think it's possible. Certainly for the next year or two, I think I'm going to stay committed to launching this business and trying to see it through, because we're going through such difficult times now as a country and as a business. And I'd like to try to do everything I can to keep this one alive, because everything is about survival mode now. And I would feel really that I wasn't doing my best to our investors and to myself. I didn't really give it my all to make it go.
One question, I'm circling back to the very beginning, and I neglected to ask, why did you change your name?
I didn't change my name. Actually, my father's name was Abel. His birth name was Abel Weintraub, and he changed it because he wanted to. In Romanian newspapers at the time, because of the anti-Semitic purges that were going on, they didn't like Jewish names on mastheads, and so they asked him to take a pen name, where he worked in Romania, and he came up with the name Valentine. He never remembered why he came up with that name. And when we moved to the U.S., people couldn't. Valentine is just an odd accentual pattern for English, and so just naturally, in the course of people calling name, it became Dean. Nobody could ever say Dean Valentine. It always became Dean Valentine, and since Valentine's Day, and Valentine was already part of the language, so people just called me that. That was my name effectively from the time we moved here in 1962, and when I became a citizen in '66 or '67, I already was putting an E on my name because that's how you spelled it in English from my point of view. So they sometimes would call themselves Valentine and sometimes call themselves Valentine because it was the same thing for them. They would call him Abel Valentine. He never got called Abel Valentine. But so that's really what it was. It was a sort of organic evolution of the name. And Dino was, not a, that's just Dean in English. So I never really changed my name. It just kind of
You
wound up there.
you just adapted to the forces.
It was changed for me, I guess, insofar as it was a change. Yeah.
All right. Well, finally, how would you like to be remembered?
I'd like to be remembered as I'd like to be remembered as the son of immigrant parents, and as the father of two wonderful American children, and having lived the experience that came between those two things, But that's really, I think those are the determinative, and as the husband of a fabulous woman, but I think those are the determinative aspects of my life, much more so than being in the magazine business or the TV business. And those are really the only things that have any real meaning for me emotionally, so along with the art. But the TV business, I have no desire to be remembered or forgotten or either. It was just, like I said, it was part of the gig, and it was great fun, and I'm really pleased. But if I never have my name inscribed anywhere in the TV business, or I never get to have any conversation with anybody again, I won't miss it. On the other hand, I'll always watch television, and I'll always be glad to have that box in my home.
Dean, thanks so much.
Thanks.